Beautiful day again, but I'm not here to talk about that. What I am here to talk about is something that I read yesterday under a video that I posted. It was the one of Simon and his vaccination story, and this comment it really did quite upset me. So what did this person say? Well, basically they recounted a story, and it concerned their son. And this person, they tried to, I think it was their dad, they repeatedly tried to warn their son about not going to go and see Maxine. And despite spending hours and hours and hours like trying to convince him not to go, he actually did go. And he blamed himself for his son's actions. And then there were other people joining in underneath saying, yeah, you didn't do a very good job of parenting him for him to do that. And I just want to respond to that. The first thing to say is that it's got nothing to do with you. God created all of us with free will, including your son. And you can never be held responsible for somebody else's actions. And I feel that that's an important aspect of natural law. No one can hold you accountable for something that somebody else has done, including your own son. And the simple reason for that is that your son is separate from you. He might have half of your DNA, but he has his own unique soul. And God created him with free will. Is it, in this circumstance, is it upsetting for this guy to be upset at what his son did? Of course it is. Might he want to blame himself? I suppose so. You might sort of question your own decisions bringing him up. But I think the other thing to say as well is that each of us are embarking on our own sort of learning journey through life, us and our kids. The other thing I'd say too is, okay, I know we kind of our DNA comes from our parents. But we are, look, what I'll say here is that if I think about my own family, my dad, my mum, and I've got a brother, we're all completely different. I'm a very different person to my brother, even though my DNA comes from the same parents. Sometimes I've often wondered, like, just how different I am from my brother, like completely different interests, different values, different abilities. Chalk and cheese, absolute chalk and cheese. I'd say the same for my mum as well. I had a few things in common with my dad, including sporting interests and stuff like that. But in terms of other aspects of personality, he was very unlike me. He died before the pantomime started in 2020. But if he had been alive, I would have had no doubt whatsoever that he would have trusted the NHS, and he would have followed the advice of his GP, including going to see Maxine. And I doubt very much I would have been able to convince him otherwise. I would have tried, but I would have failed. Incidentally, he actually was done in by that organisation anyway, and it was, I remember when he was retired sort of like late 50s, and he went up to live in Morecambe with this woman that he met on the cruise, honestly. My mum had divorced him and whatever, so, he was a classic example, I think, of a bloke that didn't do particularly well living on his own. So he jumped out, he was thrown out of the frying pan and he ended up into the fire. You know, poor sod. Rest in peace. Anyway, you know, when he first went up there, he was like very fit, played golf, and then he went to the NHS, or I think this woman like basically sent him to a GP to get registered, and then they do all of these tests. And of course, we now know what these tests are about. They're about creating consumers, aren't they, for the customers for the big pharmaceutical giants. And he was swiftly put onto statins, and that's when his problems started with what he described as rheumatoid arthritis. You know, this rheumatoid arthritis only became symptomatic after he'd started being put on these statins medications. I'm sure it was just a coincidence. Anyway, what I'm saying here is that we're all different. Just because you're related to somebody, it doesn't mean that you're going to share aspects of personality, or even that your core values are going to be the same. As a parent, bringing children up, all you can do is just articulate what your values are and what the arguments in favour are of particular positions, or maybe counter the prevailing status quo with arguments that they're not going to hear at school or on TV. So I'm sure if you spoke to my son about that, he would definitely say that his dad absolutely bored him to death with arguments about libertarianism, what it is to be truly free, and why government is a bad idea. Because they're not going to get taught that at school, definitely not. They're just going to get arguments about why we need bigger government to solve all our problems. There's not a balanced presentation of arguments going on within the education system, including within the private sector. So we'd like to think that we might be able to influence our kids and teach them right from wrong. And for them to absorb what we've been saying to them. But there's no guarantee of that. That's what I'm trying to get at. So for this person whose son had the vaccine, please don't blame yourself for that. Your son was created with free will. And that wasn't an accident. That was by design, by God's design. And I think as well, for us as parents, ultimately, we have to respect the free will of our own kids. I think things can go very, very badly wrong when you have parents who think that they can override the free will of their kids. So when I was growing up, there was a friend of my brother's, a guy called Bryce Taylor, and he was a smart guy. But he wasn't, in terms of academics, he was like a good memory, fast computer, his brain was like a little computer, fast processing speed. But in terms of wisdom, he kind of lacked that. So because of that, he was inclined towards making all sorts of stupid decisions, like not using his God-given abilities and instead spending his time drinking out-of-date beer that he'd bought, at the age of 13 from a completely bent local shopkeeper who sold them out-of-date beer for a low price, which, believe it or not, they ended up drinking in a disused electricity substation. Of course, my brother was in with that crowd as well. My brother thought that I was a loser because whilst he was doing that, I was playing cricket and football and, studying reasonably hard at school. Anyway, Bryce's mum and dad just went full, totalitarian on him and basically grounded him, tried to micromanage his life, from the age of, 12, 13, something like that. And you never guess what happened. things got worse. Bryce responded to the kind of control freakery of his parents by going even further off the deep end, going off the rails. He kind of rebelled against it. So his mum and dad were in a very, very difficult position, and I honestly don't know what I would have done in those circumstances. But what I'm getting at here is, I think on a lot of occasions the worst thing that you can do is go against people's free will. I think all you can do as a parent is, first of all, try to teach them something, explain to them why what they're doing isn't a great idea. And then I think the other thing that you can do is like not facilitate their harmful behaviour. So by giving them money or something, pocket money or whatever. So, you know, if you had a kid who was drinking out-of-date beer in an electricity substation, it might be a good idea to not give them pocket money for a while. But there's not a lot you can do, though, because ultimately at the end of the day, if somebody's going to choose to do stupid things, it's pretty hard to stop them from doing those stupid things. And I think as a parent, it's just, you know, I think you're being overly tough on yourself if you blame yourself for your kids' actions. So what is good parenting? You know, I've sort of been critical of this guy, this Bryce Taylor's parents. What does good parenting look like? I'll give you an example, I think, of what I thought was good parenting. And it relates to my own dad and something that he did or said to me when I was about 21, 22. So I'd just finished university. And my dad had been very good during university, because back in those days you had like a student grant, and then it was topped up with like parental contributions. So I think my dad paid about a third of it, something like that. I got 2/3 from the government as a grant, as it was back in the day. So we're talking here about ancient history. I went to university between 1983 and 1986, and my PGCE I did I went back to university in 1988 and to do a postgraduate teaching qualification. And back then it was zero tuition fees, obviously, but actually I got paid a grant to train as a teacher. Anyway, I spoke to my dad. I'd finished university, and I think somebody was going on holiday or something, and I got invited to come with them. But the problem was I didn't have any money. I was skint. So I thought, I'll phone up my dad and see if he can kind of like send me a few quid. So I phoned him up, and he went absolutely ballistic at me. Basically saying to me that you finished university now, you're 21, whatever it was, 21, 22. It's time for you to kind of take control of your own affairs and manage your own money. And when I put the receiver down after, it's one of those ones where he really did have a go. And even as I put the phone down and walked away from the telephone box, because there was no mobile phones back then, I kind of realised that what my dad had said was absolutely spot on. And I would say it was the most important bit of parenting that he ever did. Certainly, in my teenage years, without question. Because the things that he was saying was absolutely correct. And I took his advice, and I never asked for money from him again. Never. What was really weird about this was that it was a different matter with my brother. So, surprise, surprise, my brother didn't get particularly good qualifications from school. And my brother's first job was entirely down to my dad's help. He worked in advertising, and he managed to get him a job in an advertising agency. I think they even lied about the lack of his qualifications. That's not good. That's not good. But then what was interesting was that it was a low paid job, and for decades and decades and decades, in fact until my dad died, so like well into my brother's 40s, my brother was constantly tapping my dad up for cash. And unlike me, my dad would open his wallet. I think it was, I don't know, I can only sort of think that he believed that my brother needed the money. I think also as well, my mum had always kind of favoured my brother, so it was one of those ones where I think he was almost trying to, although they were divorced, he was trying to win good boy points off my mum, from my mum rather. So guess what? What happened was, it was like Pavlov's dogs or Skinner's rats. My dad's kind of actions taught my brother something, that there's no need to kind of like try to advance your career, work your proverbials off, because there's always dad here who'll crash the cash for a family holiday or whatever it is. And him and his wife, they were just shameless about it. So what do I think about that? Who got the better end of the stick, me or my brother? I would say without doubt it was me, because sometimes the best parenting involves doing what might be unpopular, something that your own child might dislike. And I suppose you could call it, as a cliche, you could call it tough love, couldn't you? You shouldn't reward bad behaviour patterns. So I always like to end my video on a positive. And this time I'm also going to try and drop a truth bomb that will blow your mind. This bird tower was created by somebody. It was designed and constructed by somebody. None of this is an accident. And that also includes us as human beings. We've been created by God. Now, I think it's self-evident that our Creator created us with free will. We're allowed to make our own choices, come to our own judgments and conclusions about things. This is what God wanted for us. So when people talk about the meaning of life, I think an important aspect is, what are you going to do with your God-given free will? If you think back to that Simon Real Ale craft beer who had 6 pints before he went to get vaccinated, that's what he chose to do with his God-given free will. He chose to go and visit Maxine, to go on holiday. Didn't really consider at all how his decision to comply would affect the rest of humanity. So in effect, you could say that this bloke sold the rest of us down the river so he could go on a foreign holiday. That's what he did with his free will. I think if you've watched that video, you can actually see it on his face that he knows that what he did was wrong. You can see the pain on his face, the pain that he himself created as a direct consequence of choosing to do something deeply immoral. So I think this is what this free will's about. It's sometimes we need to experience a bit of pain to learn. Following the pain comes the realization. So if you think about Klaus and the gang, what they want with their transhumanism is to create a creature who is controllable, to create a creature who does not have free will. In fact, that Noah Harari guy, he actually kind of brags about that, doesn't he? That the age of free will, if he gets his way, is going to be over. And I believe that this is a satanic inversion of the world that God wanted to create for us, and what he had in mind for us as human beings, his creation. We were created with free will. Whilst we're here on this planet, we're expected to learn. Yes, we're all fallen people, we'll all make mistakes, but what we're supposed to do is to learn from our mistakes over our life. So by the time we're about to draw our last breath, we can look back over our life and maybe feel as though we're slightly wiser now than we were earlier on in our lives. That in essence we made progress. This is also something quite controversial, really. I've got a son. He's young adult, 20 years old, huge bloke, 6'8", muscle man. And sometimes, quite a lot of the time actually, I look at him and I look at my wife and I think, like, we created him. That's amazing. We created him almost out of nothing, didn't we? So not only have we got free will, but we've also been given, like, our ability to have children is like a God-given power. We have the freedom to create other human beings who also have been given the God-given gift of free will. And I think as parents, we're just as God accepts and embraces our free will, like we might not do things that he approves of, but he's never taken our free will away from us. And I think that's an important lesson for us with our creations, our family, the things that we've created, our sons and daughters, that yes, teach them, guide them, but never control them. We must respect their free will. And if they go off the rails, well then that's their issue, not ours. As I said earlier on, it's totally immoral to blame somebody for somebody else's actions, even if it's that person's flesh and blood. And that's all I want to say today, so God bless.